The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe. The year is 8000 BCE, a ridgeline in southeastern Turkey. And someone is doing something that makes no sense. They are not building, they are burying. Thousands of workers, organized with military precision, are shoveling hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble onto the most sophisticated temple complex the world had ever seen. No flood forced them, no conqueror ordered it. They did it themselves. And then they walked away. For 11,000 years, nobody talked about it. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt rediscovered the site in 1994 after it had been misidentified as a medieval cemetery in a 1963 survey. What he found beneath the soil rewrote the calendar of human civilization. Radiocarbon dating by the German Archaeological Institute places the oldest construction layers at 9,600 to 8,200 BCE, making the site 11,600 years old. The T-shaped limestone pillars reach 5.5 meters tall and weigh up to 10 metric tons each, carved with foxes, scorpions, vultures, and abstract symbols. Ground-penetrating radar suggests up to 200 additional pillars remain unexcavated. Geologist Klaus Günther Neumann confirmed the burial fill was deliberately transported and layered, not natural accumulation. There are no hearths, no domestic waste, no sleeping quarters. Nobody lived here. They only came to worship. The standard explanation is that pre-agricultural groups periodically retired sacred spaces by sealing them, a known practice in later Mesoamerican cultures. But those cultures built new temples on top of the old ones. At Göbekli Tepe, nothing was built on top. It was buried and abandoned completely. Some researchers ask whether the burial coincides with the Younger Dryas impact event, a catastrophic climate collapse around 10,900 BCE that reorganized ecosystems across the northern hemisphere. Was this a time capsule? Or was someone erasing their own tracks before something terrible arrived? We may never know. What we do know is that someone organized a civilization capable of monumental construction at least 7,000 years before Stonehenge, then spent equal effort making sure we would never find it. From a temple buried in the earth, we travel west to a temple carved with something that should not exist on any wall from the ancient world. The Dendera Light Reliefs. 60 kilometers north of Luxor, beneath the Hathor Temple at Dendera, there are subterranean crypts cut into the bedrock. The corridors are 4 feet high. You crawl to reach them, and when your light hits the walls, you see something carved in raised limestone relief that stops your breath. It looks like a glass bulb, an elongated transparent envelope, a serpent inside it coiled like a filament, mounted on an insulating pillar. Connected to what appears to be an external power box, it was carved 2,000 years ago. And once you see it, you cannot explain it away. Austrian researchers Peter Krasa and Reinhard Habeck brought these reliefs to mainstream attention in their 1992 book, arguing the imagery depicted an electrochemical light source. 3 panels in sequence appear to show different states of illumination. The crypt chambers are completely sealed with no windows, yet the painted surfaces inside show no torch soot on the ceilings, a detail noted by researchers who compared Dendera to every other torch-lit Egyptian space, which are uniformly blackened. Electrical engineer Walter Garn built a functional replica of the device using materials available to ancient Egyptians and demonstrated a visible glow. The insulating pillar in the relief matches the Djed column, which Egyptologists translate as stability, but which structurally mirrors a modern ceramic electrical insulator. Mainstream Egyptologists classify the imagery as a creation myth, the primordial serpent, Nehebkau, rising from the lotus womb, a cosmogonic scene common across Egyptian iconography. But the lotus birth scene appears hundreds of times in Egyptian art and never looks like this. No other lotus has internal anatomy resembling a filament. No other lotus is mounted on a column and wired to a box. Some researchers ask whether Egyptian priests, who guarded technical knowledge within closed castes for centuries, encoded a functional understanding of electrochemical light in the one language that would survive invaders: stone. The same invaders who destroyed the Library of Alexandria 50 kilometers away. From the deserts of Egypt, we drop beneath the surface of the Pacific, where the ruins of something vast have been sitting in cold silence since before the last ice age ended. The Yonaguni Underwater Monument. 25 meters below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, off the western tip of Japan's Yonaguni Island, the seafloor does something that geology is not supposed to do. It stops being a seafloor, it becomes a room. Sheer vertical walls, right-angle corners, broad flat terraces the size of sports fields, stone staircases leading to platforms aligned with the cardinal points. Diving instructor Kihachiro Aratake first observed it in 1986 while searching for hammerhead sharks. He surfaced and tried to describe what he had seen. Nobody believed him until Professor Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus went down himself and spent 15 years mapping it. Kimura cataloged at least 10 major structural features, including a main terrace, a formation he identified as a ceremonial plaza, and a triangular platform, all covering approximately 150 meters in length and 20 meters in height. Sea level data from Japan's National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology confirms the Yonaguni Shelf was above water until approximately 8,000 to 10,000 BCE, placing any construction firmly on dry land during the last ice age. Kimura identified what he interpreted as a drainage channel on the upper terrace in his surveys, a feature with no geological explanation. Geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University, known for his controversial redating of the Great Sphinx, visited in 1997 and concluded the main platform is probably natural, shaped by tectonic fracturing of layered sandstone. But Schoch himself noted several features he could not account for geologically. Sandstone does fracture along natural planes and can produce angular formations. That much is documented. But sandstone fractures do not produce staircases. They do not produce isolated pillars. They do not produce round holes drilled to uniform depth across a flat surface in a regular pattern. And yet all three features have been documented at Yonaguni. Kimura believes this is a remnant of a Jomon-era civilization, possibly the origin of ancient Japanese legends of a sunken land. Some researchers ask, if this structure stood on dry land 12,000 years ago, how many other coastal settlements are sitting undiscovered on continental shelves worldwide, waiting for someone to look? From a submerged monument in the Pacific, we travel to a glass case in the British Museum, where a Roman wine cup is quietly holding technology the modern world did not invent until the 20th century. The Lycurgus Cup. Walk into room 41 of the British Museum and you will find a Roman cup that looks ordinary. It is jade green, opaque, carved with a mythological scene. Unremarkable. Then someone switches on a light behind it. The cup turns blood red, not tinted, not gradated. A deep luminous crimson, as if something inside it is alive. This is not a trick of the glass. It is engineered nanotechnology. A Roman craftsman in the 4th century CE suspended gold-silver alloy particles between 50 and 100 nanometers in diameter throughout the glass matrix, creating a dichroic optical effect. Nanoparticle engineering was not formally developed until 1959. They did it 1,700 years earlier. The British Museum Research Laboratory confirmed the nanoparticle structure in 1990, publishing findings that stunned materials scientists. The alloy composition is approximately 70% silver to 30% gold, a specific ratio that maximizes the optical color shift, suggesting intentional formulation rather than a random impurity. Ian Freestone, co-author of the analysis, noted the uniformity of particle distribution was remarkable given the complete absence of modern mixing technology. In 2013, researchers at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign demonstrated in a paper published in ACS Nano that the cup's nanoparticle structure is 100 times more sensitive to changes in surrounding liquid than modern commercial optical sensors, making it a theoretically functional diagnostic device. Only one other ancient Roman glass fragment held at the Corning Museum of Glass shows a similar composition, suggesting this was not widespread knowledge but a closely guarded technique. Most historians and materials scientists argue the effect was accidental, that Roman glassmakers experimenting with gold and silver colorants stumbled onto a specific concentration and firing temperature without understanding the physics. Skilled empiricists can repeat a successful formula without knowing why it works. But replicating this effect in modern laboratories requires precise control of particle size within a narrow band. A random process would produce the color change in only a tiny fraction of attempts and almost never uniformly across an entire vessel. Some researchers ask whether the Roman Empire, with its access to Greek, Egyptian, and Mesopotamian scientific traditions, harbored a school of optical science whose records were destroyed along with everything else we lost in Alexandria. The cup itself offers no answer. It only changes color depending on which way you hold the light. From Rome's impossible glass, we travel to the floor of the Mediterranean, where an even more impossible machine spent 2,000 years rusting at the bottom of the sea, the Antikythera mechanism. In the year 1900, sponge divers working off the Greek island of Antikythera pulled bronze statues, amphorae, and jewelry from a Roman-era shipwreck 45 meters down, and one corroded lump that nobody could identify. It sat in the Athens Museum for decades, misunderstood, until researcher Derek DeSalla Price of Yale began studying it in 1951 and published his analysis in 1974. What he described changed the history of technology permanently. The lump was a geared astronomical computer, hand-cranked, bronze, with 30 interlocking gear wheels capable of calculating the positions of the sun and moon, predicting solar eclipses on an 18-year Saros cycle, and tracking the 4-year Panhellenic Games calendar. The next device, of comparable mechanical complexity, does not appear in the historical record until European astronomical clocks of the 14th century CE. A gap of 1,400 years. The University College London Antikythera research team published a comprehensive reconstruction model in 2021 in Scientific Reports, identifying a front display showing the motions of all 5 classical planets, the first confirmed planetary model in a single ancient mechanism. 82 surviving bronze fragments contain gears with teeth just 1.2 millimeters apart, requiring precision tooling whose existence has not been confirmed for the period. Inscriptions on the back cover name the eclipse prediction cycle as the Saros cycle of 223 lunar months, accurate to within Greek calendar reckoning. X-ray tomography by the Cardiff University Research Project in 2006 revealed 2,000 previously unread characters on the interior plates. Cicero, writing in 77 BCE, described a device made by Archimedes that represented the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets. The description matches the mechanism almost exactly. Historians of science, including Tony Freeth, who led the UCL team, acknowledge the mechanism as genuine and extraordinary. Their position is that it represents the apex of Hellenistic mechanical astronomy, built on the theoretical models of Apollonius and Hipparchus, a tradition simply lost when Greek scientific culture was disrupted by Rome's expansion. But if this was the apex of a known tradition, where is the tradition? Yeah, thousands of Greek scientific texts survive. Not one describes how to build a geared computer. Not one even hints that such devices were common. The mechanism doesn't look like the top of a ladder. It looks like something that fell from a height we haven't located yet. From the wreck of a Greek ship, we travel east to a clay jar found outside Baghdad that, when filled with the right liquid, generates enough electricity to plate gold. The Baghdad Battery. 1936. A German archaeologist named Wilhelm König is excavating a Parthian settlement at Kujut Rabu outside Baghdad. He finds a sealed clay jar, 14 centimeters tall. Inside, a copper cylinder. Inside the copper cylinder, an iron rod, corroded as if it has been in prolonged contact with an acid. König publishes his interpretation in 1938 in Forschungen und Fortschritte. His conclusion: this is a galvanic cell, a battery, from the age of Caesar. The archaeological establishment largely ignores him. 2 years later, Willard Gray at the General Electric High Voltage Laboratory builds a replica and fills it with grape juice. The assembly generates 1.5 volts of direct electrical current. It works. Approximately 12 to 14 similar jars have been identified across collections in Baghdad, Berlin, and Pennsylvania, suggesting the design was not unique to a single site. The copper cylinder in the original shows corrosion patterns consistent with prolonged acidic electrolyte contact, confirmed by chemical analysis. German Egyptologist Arne Egebrecht used a replica battery in 1978 to electroplate a silver statuette with gold in under 2 hours, demonstrating a plausible ancient application. The iron rod carries an asphalt seal at its insertion point, a deliberate insulating measure that has no function in scroll storage but is precisely what you would add if you understood electrical conduction. British Museum researcher Paul Craddock noted that some ancient gold-plated objects from the region display a plating uniformity achievable only by electrodeposition, not by fire gilding. The mainstream counter-argument is straightforward. The jars were used to store sacred scrolls, a documented preservation technique involving a metal rod sealed in clay. The corrosion is from organic material, not acid. Koenig's battery interpretation was an imaginative leap from a corroded storage vessel, but no papyrus, no scroll remnant, and no organic trace has ever been found inside any of the jars. The shape of the copper cylinder, open at both ends and sized to maximize liquid contact, is specifically not optimal for scroll storage. Some researchers ask whether the same ancient technical tradition that carved the Dendera reliefs and buried the Antikythera mechanism also quietly discovered that submerging two metals in acid produces a current, and whether they had any idea what that current could do. From the banks of the Tigris, we cross the Mediterranean to a small island where a spiral of stamped clay has defeated every linguist and cryptographer on Earth for more than a century. The Phaistos Disk. On the 3rd of July, 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier is excavating the basement of the Minoan Palace of Phaistos on Crete. He finds a fired clay disc 16 centimeters across. Both faces are covered in a spiral of stamped symbols, 241 tokens in 61 groups pressed into soft clay with individual seal stamps before firing. You have seen cuneiform. You have seen linear A. You have seen linear B. Not one of those scripts shares a single sign with this disc. This language belongs to no known civilization. It has been sitting in the Heraklion Archaeological Museum since 1908. And in 115 years of scholarship, no proposed decipherment has achieved scientific consensus. The disc uses 45 distinct signs applied with pre-manufactured stamp tools, making it the earliest confirmed example of movable type in history, predating Gutenberg by 3,200 years. Thermoluminescence dating places the firing in the 17th century BCE, consistent with its archaeological layer. Statistical analysis by researcher Jean-Pierre Olivier confirmed the symbol distribution follows patterns consistent with a syllabic script, not an alphabet or logographic system. Dr. Gareth Owens of the Technological Educational Institute of Crete proposed a partial reading in 2014, identifying one cluster as possibly meaning Great Lady of Importance, but this remains contested and covers only a fraction of the text. Minoan Linear A, the script used contemporaneously at the same palace, also remains undeciphered. Crete in 1700 BCE was apparently operating two separate unreadable writing systems simultaneously. Most Minoan scholars, including Yves Duhoux of the Université Catholique de Louvain, argue the disc may have originated elsewhere, possibly Anatolia, explaining its unique script. With a single example, they note statistical decipherment is mathematically near impossible. But the stamp tool manufacturing process implies the script was used frequently enough to justify building a complete set of 45 individual embossing seals. You do not fabricate a precision scriptorium for a single document. Someone was printing this script regularly. So where are the other discs? Some researchers ask whether the spiral layout is not text at all, but a map, a star chart, or a musical notation, which would explain why every linguistic approach has failed. From a mystery pressed into clay on a Mediterranean island, we cross the Atlantic to a jungle floor scattered with hundreds of perfect stone spheres the size of small cars, left behind by a people who vanished before anyone thought to ask them what the spheres meant. The Stone Spheres of Costa Rica. 1939. Workers clearing jungle for the United Fruit Company in Costa Rica's Diquís Delta hack through vegetation and hit something hard. They clear the brush, a sphere, a perfect sphere, granite, 6 feet across, 16 tons. They find another, and hundreds more scattered across riverbeds, burial sites, and the courtyards of abandoned settlements, some the size of a fist, some the size of a small house, all of them smooth, all of them round, all of them made by the Diquís people, who left no written language and vanished before Columbus arrived. American archaeologist Doris Stone brought them to international attention in 1943. Smithsonian archaeologist Matthew Sterling measured them across expeditions in the 1940s. In 2014, UNESCO designated the site a World Heritage Landmark. Sterling surveys documented over 300 spheres ranging from 10 centimeters to 2.57 meters in diameter. Engineer Joseph Sheets confirmed in 1979 that the largest spheres deviate from perfect spherical geometry by less than 2 millimeters across their full diameter, a tolerance tighter than modern mass-produced ball bearings. Petrographic analysis by the National Museum of Costa Rica confirmed the primary material is gabbro quarried in the Talamanca Mountains, a minimum 50-kilometer transport distance over mountainous terrain, without wheels, without iron tools, and without draft animals. Archaeologist John Hoops of the University of Kansas noted in 2010 that spheres found undisturbed appear arranged in geometric patterns, lines, triangles, and parallelograms, suggesting an astronomical or ceremonial function. Not a single half-finished sphere, not a single failed attempt has ever been found. Archaeologists, including Hoops, argue the spheres were symbols of chiefly power. The ability to move and shape these objects demonstrated political authority. Near-perfect roundness was achievable through patient pecking and grinding with stone tools, labor-intensive but not technically impossible. But the 2 mm tolerance across a 2.5-meter sphere requires iterative precision measurement at every stage of production. You need a reference standard. You need a calibration tool. And not one measuring instrument of any kind has ever been recovered from a Dyquise site. Some researchers ask whether these were not manufactured from scratch, but selected and refined from naturally rounded river boulders, reducing the precision requirement. Others ask whether the Dyquise inherited a technique from an older tradition. The manufacturing site has never been found. The question of how has never been answered. From a jungle floor covered in impossible precision, we sail west across the entire Pacific to the most isolated island on Earth, where a writing system carved on wooden tablets echoes impossibly with the script from 5,000 miles away. The Rongo Rongo script of Easter Island. Easter Island. 163 square kilometers of volcanic rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 3,500 kilometers from the nearest inhabited land. A culture that raised 900 stone giants and stared them toward the horizon. And hidden from the outside world for centuries, a writing system. Carved onto 26 surviving wooden tablets in a language that has never been read. When missionary Eugène Hérault first reported the tablets in 1864, the knowledge to decode them was already almost gone. Bishop Jowson of Tahiti traveled to find readers in 1866 and found only 4 elderly islanders, each giving contradictory readings of the same tablet. Within a generation, the last reader was dead. In the 1990s, Russian researcher Sergei Ryabchikov subjected the script to comparative statistical analysis. His finding has been difficult to dismiss. The frequency distribution and syntactic clustering of Rongo-Rongo signs shows structural parallels with the undeciphered script of the Indus Valley civilization. 2 cultures, 12,000 miles of open ocean between them. No known contact. The same structural fingerprint. Thomas Barthel's foundational study cataloged approximately 14,000 individual glyph tokens across roughly 120 distinct signs on the surviving tablets. The script is written in Boustrophodon, alternating left to right and right to left on each line, rotating the tablet 180 degrees between rows, an unusual convention also found in archaic Greek and some early Semitic scripts. Carbon dating of the Santiago staff, one of the longest Rongo-Rongo texts, places its wood in the 17th to 19th centuries CE, though the script itself is believed to be older, copied onto replacement timber. Population geneticist Anna Sapfo Malaspinus published evidence in Current Biology in 2014 of pre-Columbian contact between Easter Island Polynesians and South American populations around 1200 CE, proving the island was not as isolated as assumed. Rongo-Rongo is the only writing system in all of Polynesia. Every other Polynesian culture across thousands of islands developed without one. The mainstream linguistic position, held by scholars, including Stephen Fisher, is that Rongo-Rongo was invented locally after contact with Spanish proclamations in 1770, an islander who saw written text for the first time and independently created a script to mimic the concept. The Indus parallels are considered coincidental, but the 1770 contact theory requires an illiterate population to invent a complete complex writing system within a few generations, and then lose the ability to read it entirely within one more. That is not how scripts die. Scripts die when the culture that carries them is destroyed. Some researchers ask whether both Rongo-Rongo and the Indus script are regional expressions of a much older proto-writing tradition shared by maritime cultures whose roots we have not yet traced. From the most isolated island on Earth, we return to Egypt, where a wooden bird found in a museum drawer in 1898 has been quietly waiting for someone to notice it flies. The Saqqara bird. Cairo, 1898. Excavators working the Saqqara necropolis open the tomb of Padi Emin and find the usual inventory: shabti, amulets, canopic jars, and a bird. 6 inches of sycamore wood, painted brown, wings outstretched. It is catalogued as a decorative figurine, assigned object number 6347 at the Cairo Museum, and placed in a storage drawer. It stays there for 70 years. In 1969, Egyptian physician and amateur archaeologist Khalil Messiha is reviewing wooden figurines from the collection. He picks up the bird, he turns it over, and he notices that the tail is wrong. Not wrong as in damaged, wrong as in anatomically impossible for any bird that has ever existed. The tail fin is horizontal, perpendicular to the wings. This is not how birds are built. It is exactly how aircraft are built. Every fixed-wing aircraft in history carries a horizontal stabilizer for pitch control. No animal in nature does. The Egyptians carved one onto a wooden object in approximately 200 BCE. Messiha presented his findings to the Egyptian Youth Scientific Congress in December 1971. His analysis confirmed the wing profile generates lift at an angle of attack consistent with a functioning glider. In 1991, aviation experts Simon Sanderson and Martin Gregory tested a weighted balsa replica at the Royal Aeronautical Society and confirmed it glided stably once a small vertical tail fin was added, a fin Messiha believed was originally present and lost to time. Engineers Algund Einboom and Peter Belting constructed scaled-up models in 1996 with reconstructed tail fins and flew them successfully as remote-controlled aircraft. The inscription on the base, according to researchers who have examined it, reads, "I want to fly in Demotic script," a phrase found on no other decorative bird figurine in the Egyptian record. Separately, at least 5 wooden objects from pre-Columbian cultures in Colombia, the so-called golden flyers of the Sinu people, show the same impossible horizontal stabilizer and have been successfully flown as model aircraft in replica form. Egyptologists classify the Saqqara bird as a votive object representing the Ba, the soul bird of Egyptian afterlife theology, depicted as a human-headed bird that flew between the living and the dead. The unusual tail is considered an artistic simplification or a manufacturing irregularity. But the Ba is always depicted with a human head. Every other Ba figurine in the Egyptian collection has one. This bird does not, and the horizontal stabilizer cannot be a simplification because it is the most specific and structurally demanding feature of the object. Some researchers ask whether the Saqqara bird was a proof of concept, a scale model from an engineering tradition we have not found the rest of. In a civilization capable of moving 70-ton blocks across open desert, aerial reconnaissance of the Nile would have had obvious strategic value. Was this a toy? A religious symbol? Or a memo, carved in wood, from someone who had solved a problem history insists nobody was working on? 10 objects from 10 different corners of the ancient world. A buried temple that demands a civilization before civilization. An electric lamp etched in stone. A sunken monument swallowed by the sea at the end of the last ice age. A Roman cup built with nanotechnology. A geared computer 14 centuries ahead of its time. A battery that replicates Volta's discovery by 2,000 years. An undecipherable disk with no parallel anywhere on Earth. Stone spheres of impossible precision with no tools and no manufacturing site. A writing system on the world's most isolated island that supposedly echoes a script from 5,000 miles away. and a wooden bird with an aerodynamic tail that no animal has ever grown. The mainstream explanation for each of these is convergence, coincidence, or lost craft tradition, and each explanation is defensible in isolation. But isolation is the problem. These anomalies do not appear in isolation. They appear in a pattern, a recurring signature of knowledge that runs deeper than the timelines allow. History may not be a straight march from ignorance to enlightenment. It may be a cycle of discovery and loss, and we may be living in one of the rediscovery phases, picking up pieces of something that was once whole. Most people walk through museums and see dusty objects behind glass. You made it here, which means you see questions. That is a rarer and more valuable thing. Subscribe and drop your answer in the comments. Which one of these 10 breaks history the hardest? Make the case. The floor is yours. A temple buried on purpose, a bird that flies, a cup that changes color in your hand. These are not accidents scattered across time. They are a single unfinished sentence, written in stone and wood and bronze, waiting for someone patient enough to read it. The most dangerous secrets were never hidden. They were labeled wrong